If you've read the title of this video, you'll know that this video is about Chica's Party World and its decline at the hands of Fazbear Entertainment. But, to give some quick context, what is this location? Chica's Party World was a business, first teased in the source code and the images running up to the release of sister location. It was said to be a client of Afton Robotics, a company operated and owned by everyone's favourite yellow rabbit man, William Purple Guy Afton. Afton Robotics would essentially lease the animatronics they created, in this case likely some version of Chica, out to Chica's Party World. When this location finally came out, there was no trace of Chica or Chica's Party World to be found, which made sense as she'd been rented out of the location during the time of the game. Side note, it still strikes me as odd that Afton Robotics is still fully functional with employees coming in and out, even while Mike is there, and being able to lease out characters, despite it being implied that Afton is currently trapped behind a wall. But I suppose he's just got the place hooked up to a ton of backup generators, so that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, we get FNaF 6, and while it doesn't directly have any confirmations about Chica's Party World itself, it does confirm that a Funtime Chica existed. Something I've seen no one discuss when bringing her up is that she's sold off by Rare Finds Auction. And given what we know about the other sellers, it's likely that this is a separate company from Fazbear Entertainment, Afton Robotics and Chica's Party World, obviously. This would therefore imply that between the events of Sister Location and Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Chica's actually shut down, with Rare Finds, obviously, finding her in the rubble or whatever. This could even explain her inexplicably missing parts, namely the panel on the top of the chest. Besides that, however, we get no real solid foundation to solve what this place was. That is until then, years later, we get the greatest game in the franchise, and no, this isn't up for debate. Secret of the Mimic. We learn a lot about Chica's Party World, what kind of location it was, the animatronics within the walls of the business, and even a basic menu, showcasing what they served there. The game's been out for nearly a year, so I'm sure you've all seen it by now, but in case you haven't, I'll give a very brief recap. Secret of the Mimic is set in 1979 and follows Arnold, a Fazbear Entertainment technician just getting off a nearly 40-hour shift before the company's dispatch gets a hold of him.
Since you're our closest technician on the air,
Tells Arnold to head into Murray's Costume Manor, a large workshop owned by one of Fazbear's contractors, Edwin Murray, to retrieve a set of schematics for a highly advanced endoskeleton named the Mimic. See, this Mimic Endo is special because it expands and retracts its limbs to fit in any costume or character, with it also assuming that character's identity while inside the suit. Anyway, what's important for this video is the reveal of Chica and her party world. See, about halfway through this game we get admin clearance and a task to head into Murray's office, located past the main warehouse. Going past the warehouse, Arnold makes his way into the admin wing and up the stairs, getting closer to Edwin's office. However, there's a room just before you get up there. In it, we are presented with an area covered wall to wall in Chica's Party World advertisements, blueprints, etc. It's revealed that it was owned by a company called Chica's Restaurants. They came to MCM, contracting them to create a mascot costume and an advertisement. It's shown that Fiona was the one behind designing the mascot, while Edwin actually created it, and yeah, so to briefly recap, what is Chica's Party World? Chica's Party World is a business created by whoever owns Chica's Restaurants, and is a restaurant/roller disco that was opened sometime in the 60s, as shown by this chart on one of the walls. The star was, obviously, Chica, who's backed by Mr. Cupcake, Miss Chicken, Miss Shake, and Miss Burger. By 1975, however, as the chart once again shows, it starts dropping off, resulting in, presumably, a full crash. For as clean cut as all of that seemed, you've likely noticed the major contradictions in all this. Sister Location sets it up as being a client of Afton Robotics and as having Funtime Chica. It's debated when Sister Location is set, however I believe we can all agree for this video that it's not set in the 1970s. Secret of the Mimic, meanwhile, has it a client of Murray's, and attributes the creation of Party Time Chica to Edwin and Fiona Murray, and has the place crash by the mid-70s. So, how do we store all this away in a way that doesn't have us just say, it's a retcon, and move on? Simple. William Afton gained the contract after the downfall of MCM. He also likely rebranded it. To explain this, we're going to need to go more in depth. Secret of the Mimic introduces us to Murray's Costume Manor, a contracted company owned by Edwin Murray for numerous different clients. He created mascot costumes, animatronics, carnival rides, parade floats, etc. for all of them. To note, just because Edwin created things for these clients doesn't mean he came up with the ideas directly linked to the companies, meaning no, Edwin didn't suddenly get retconned into being the creator of all the characters that were once created by Henry. The only character of the main fall that Secret of the Mimic attributes to MCM is Foxy. This isn't a retcon, as Foxy only existed with the opening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, not Fazbear Entertainment's first business venture, Fredbear's Family Diner. Furthermore, Henry's insanity ending speech only directly states,
"Small souls trapped in prisons of my making,"
which is more likely to be on about just the animatronics rather than the character. Similar to how Edwin and Fiona didn't create Chica, but rather just a version of her. Now that we've established that, let's move on. So, we need to head even further back to where it's stated in-game that they started off as just a mascot costume company, owned not by Edwin Murray, but his father, who's also ironically called Edwin Murray for some reason. However, after Edwin Sr.'s death, the Edwin we know took over, rebranding and focusing on more than just mascots. He used the place to create many inventions. MCM's largest collaborator, however, was Fazbear Entertainment. This is even reflected in the profits chart for MCM, which shows a massive spike towards the early 70s, specifically 1973. This is heavily implied to be when the Fazbear project begins. Fazbear project is mentioned multiple times in game and is revealed in the parachute ending to be a prototype of Fazbear Entertainment's newest idea, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, with a new set of animatronics. It's highly debated about which animatronics these were, and more so which set of Fazbear Entertainment demanded Edwin also create. Some people believe it's the classics, others believe it's the as of yet unseen Unwithereds. I won't be getting into that debate today, so I'll leave it at Fazbear Entertainment had MCM create these prototypes for them. It's clear, however, that this project had a darker secret. This is where we once again introduce William Afton. Even as far back as the 1970s, Afton was a cutthroat businessman, not afraid to crack a few eggs if it meant his omelette was much tastier by the end of it. In this case, he targeted Murray's Costume Manor, siphoning off employees, having them leak company secrets, namely the development of M2, before eventually swooping in as MCM fell to the ground in this message log. Software development and the entire MCM catalogue. We would love to keep you on as a lead engineer. Although we now technically own the land, we would never touch the house your parents built. We feel this offer has been more than fair considering how far behind you are. It's just too much for you to handle alone. We are waiting for your response. W.A. After obtaining Murray's land, and with the Chica animatronic in their arsenal since about 1975 as the Fazbear project included it as an animatronic, they also gained the contract that MCM had with Chica's Party World. As there was no reopening heard about in the late 70s, it's likely they didn't attempt to rent the Chica character to the former owner of Chica's restaurants again. However, as discussed earlier, it clearly reopened again at some point. So what happened? Well, to understand that, we need to discuss what actually happened to Murray's land afterwards. A quick note that the rest of this theory assumes that Secret of the Mimic's canonical ending is the parachute ending. To me, it just makes the most sense, but I don't have enough time to explain, so just run with me here. After MCM and the mansion burned to the ground, we're left with a large plot of land now owned by Fazbear Entertainment, or more specifically William Afton. And doesn't that house on the hill look pretty familiar? Both FNaF 4's menu and Curse of Dreadbear presents us with a house on the hill, both times it has been directly connected to the Aftons. So, sometime shortly after the demolishing of MCM, I believe Afton decided to have another house built out there and moved in. So there's always been this confusion surrounding the possible multiple houses that Afton owned. Back in FNaF 4 we're presented with one that's next to Fredbear's and is by the side of the road, with the whole neighbourhood near it. However, in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, we're shown another house in a clearing in the forest, with the closest building being named Junior's. It was assumed at the time that this was Fredbear's, and it was just a change because, as we know, FNaF is barely ever consistent. We then also have the FNaF 4 night gameplay house that had a different layout. It was just all very confusing. However, with the release of Secret of the Mimic, I believe Scott and Steele will have recently been helping us build out a timeline of these respective houses. To put it simply, I believe that the FNaF 4 menu house, the FFPS Midnight Motorist house, the house in Curse of Dreadbear, and the land that Murray's mansion was built on was all one location. And the FNaF 4 minigame house was a separate location, but lived in by the Aftons pre-Big Bite. As for the night gameplay house, a sister location, and Tales from Pete's Black story, Ditophobia, seem to cement it as not being a house at all. Instead, it's a testing chamber, meant to simulate the look and feel of one. So, That was a lot of waffle about houses. What does any of this have to do with Chica's party world and its reopening? Well, think about it. If Afton converted the remains of the mansion into his own house, what would he have done with MCM itself? Let's take a look at that bunker in sister location. A large futuristic facility with a scooper and an AI that guides you. Seems familiar, right? This idea is even backed up in Ruin, where we see a room that looks a lot like the scoping room, and just surrounding it is walls and lights that give off the vibe of the old costume manor. We even see some of the mascots inside the facility, just before the mimic chases us. Anyway, if Afton took over from where Murray left off, then he'd have likely picked up the contract with Chica's party world, beginning to give them a new version of Chica, Funtime Chica. This would revitalise the company once more. However, after sister location, after the Funtime animatronics have escaped the bunker, the contract expired, and Chica's party world was left once more as a mere memory, with whoever runs Rare Finds Auction coming in to sweep up the remaining items there and, as the name suggests, auction them off years later to none other than Michael Afton, the person indirectly responsible for its downfall. Anyway, that's the video. I know it was a lot of me just recapping stuff, but I'd like to start doing this again, so let me know what you think.